Yo, what is up, YouTube? Welcome back to For the Love of Humankind. I know I'm a little late on this episode. I've been going through a few things. I injured my foot and had a doctor's appointment on Friday where I had to essentially schedule an MRI to determine whether or not I have to get surgery on my foot here in the near future. So this didn't come out on Friday as originally planned, unfortunately, but we are wrapping up the Spoken Hearts Project series today, going through the timeline from grad school up until this point in my life, and really just setting the tone for the rest of this podcast. So you can also tell I don't have hair anymore. Crazy, super exciting. But I want to welcome you back to this week's episode of For the Love of Humankind. I don't know what it is about that intro that always gets me super hype. I think just anytime I have something that's like created and curated specifically for me, it just makes me super proud of the things that I've done and the things that I'm doing. And so, yeah, here we are. Episode 4, but episode 3 in the series of the Spoken Hearts Project. And this is the conclusion of that series. So over the last 2 episodes, if you have not watched those yet, go back and watch those, because essentially I talk about my life up until I go away to grad school, which was in 2015 is when I started grad school. So everything from when I was born, my childhood, high school, college, everything that's really made me who I am, and the thing that, you know, allows me to see and experience the things that I have, which I think helps put into light some of the topics that I'll be covering throughout this podcast, as well as when I bring on, you know, guests to kind of talk about their experiences and things like that. I think it's important for you to know my experiences as well, to understand where I might be coming from for some of these things. So, you know, 2015, I graduated from undergrad with communication and graphic design. I still, you know, I graduated with that, but I was on my way to grad school to study higher education, because I think I talked about this in the last episode, but my senior year, I really still didn't know what I wanted to do in college, and I had a supervisor at the time who was like, well, have you looked at higher education? And, you know, some of my really good friends were now in grad school going for higher education, and, you know, I still wasn't 100% sure what I could really do with that. And so I was like, yeah, sure, you know, I'll do it. I like, you know, being in a college atmosphere. I like experiencing, you know, different things with students. And ever since I worked for orientation, I found a knack for wanting to make the experience for students exceptional. And so I ended up going to grad school for that reason. I had people that made a difference in my life that, you know, worked in higher education and changed my pathway. And so for me, it felt only right to continue that. So I moved out of state. I moved to a pretty terrible state, moved to Ohio, where I ended up going to grad school with one of my best friends and someone who's been a mentor for me, really ever since I was a freshman in college. And he'll be on this podcast at some point. He has been a regular occurrence on my other podcasts as well. But this is very different because I think my relationship with him really progressed even further in grad school. And I got offers to go other places, but for me, I wasn't at a point in my life yet where I felt comfortable going off and being by myself. I had always been somewhere where I knew people. I had friends already, and for me to go out of state to grad school where I knew absolutely nobody, that wasn't something that I really wanted to experience yet. The thing that I felt so attractive to go to grad school in Ohio, one is because one of my best friends, Robbie, was there, and it could really just like taper off with my like need to be around people that I know, because I was like, okay, we'll have 1 year overlapping, be able to spend some more time with him, and him being the only one at at this university that I knew, and so I would be able to lean on him in the times of me feeling unsettled, I think is a good term for it, but also an opportunity for me to explore what it looks like to rely and be a part of other circles. I've always been somebody that is an outgoing person, but also has introverted tendencies. Like if you throw me out into an experience where I know absolutely nobody, I'm typically not going to be as vocal as I am with those that I know. And that's just something that I've realized about myself, but there is one exception. You throw me anywhere in Disney World by myself and I will make friends. Like that is just like my comfort zone. I think because I've spent so much time at Disney between growing up and working there that I just find comfort there. So it's really those times of like being in a new place, understanding that I need to make relationships with people that I don't even know yet, that causes me that stress and anxiety. And so going to grad school, where Robbie was, really helped me understand what that looks like for myself. And I think too, just like experiencing a higher level of learning in grad school really allowed me to understand myself more, but allowed our relationship to grow because we were able to foster deeper conversations about the things that we want to continue to do and continue to change in the field of work that we're looking at. And so started at Akron. I almost said it. I don't want to tell you where the school is because I'm about to talk some shit, but that's not true. It was a great experience. But so I was in Ohio for grad school, and I started in July of 2015. And so basically what I did there, I also had an assistantship that allowed me to have my tuition paid for, which was great. Didn't have to take out any loans for grad school. Worked in housing, supervised my first staff in grad school, and it was really a learning experience because when I went in, I very much so I don't think that I was ready for it. And that's being truthfully honest. I learned very, very quickly how to be a supervisor. Because for me, going into grad school, I was supervising students who were like pretty similar in age to where I was. And so I really wanted to be like that cool supervisor. I wanted to be a friend to them. Like, if they did things wrong, I'd be like, okay, like you're fine. Let's just talk about how we can improve from this. And I very quickly learned that is not how to be a good supervisor. In a world of learning, and especially in a field of learning, and trying to understand the development of students and people outside of high school, there's a lot that needs to be reworked based on our current systems. And so I very quickly learned that I can't be friends with who I supervise. Like, I can have a good relationship with them and be friends with them after I'm done supervising them. But in order to supervise, these students, I had to understand that, right? Because in those situations, there is accountability that takes place. There is challenge and support that takes place that I think is a different challenge and support and accountability than holding your friends, right? Like, if I have a conversation with my staff member that I need to reprimand or give some sort of written documentation, like that's part of their employment, right? But I don't do that with my friends. I mean, I guess I could, like, oh, you said some dumb shit, like, here's a letter of warning, right? Like, it's a little bit different. And it took me a while to realize that, and I think I learned a lot from the conversations I had with my supervisor, because I did not have a great supervisor, at least my first year. Just was not a great experience for me. And so, I learned how to be that support piece for my students. That first year of grad school, I think really showed me the knowledge and the passion that I had for assisting students, but also assisting people who identify differently than me. I think this is when I really explored a lot of the inequalities, especially in higher education, to a deeper depth. And I think even now, 5 years later from my freshman year, that conversation and those, plans and, things I wanted to work on, I'm still doing. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as I get to the end of this episode. But yeah, that first year was a major shock for me. Being able to understand what it's like to hold people accountable who are closer in age. I had a student that was 4 years older than me that I was holding accountable for their actions. And it's just weird. If you've never been in a position to hold somebody accountable, get used to it, because you're going to need to. In order to make change in this world, accountability is required. Like, we are all responsible for our actions. Now, I don't want to go on a tangent, because I'll talk about that in probably another podcast episode, but that experience for me that first year was a lot of learning. I also really invested in my health for the first time, I think in a long time. Robbie and I went to the gym pretty much 5 days a week at 6 a.m. right when the gym opened. And that was the most fit I have ever been in my life. And I'm going to share a photo just to show you all how big my arms were at the time. Because I still look at this photo and I'm like, man, I wish my arms still looked like that. They don't. I have lost a lot of muscle. Well, you don't really lose muscle, but I lost a lot of size because I'm not working out. And when I started to work out, I injured my foot, and here we are. That's what happened, as to why this episode is late. But yeah, I was getting in shape. I was learning a lot of stuff. I was really finding my passions in life. I was spending time and getting to know other people aside from Robbie, and a brand new area to me. And so I had a lot of hopes of what to accomplish in those 2 years that I would be there. I made some lifelong friends being there, that, we don't necessarily talk all the time, but we at least have that experience of going through grad school and working in the same department together. And we would often just go to the bar hang out in each other's apartments and just like vent about whatever, um, because that's what we needed. And I think it's funny because I look back at that experience and I have colleagues that all of us were very much in the same boat of like none of us knew what to expect, and none of us knew how to be a supervisor. Um, like it's not something that you're like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to be a supervisor one day. Like that's not something you say when you grow up. If you did, cool, I guess. But for all of us, that was our first opportunity to explore that experience, and I think we did fairly well. I think we all did much better our second year because we had a year under our belt and we were able to just explore that. But for me, in grad school, I think this is where I really started to notice how much importance it was to take care of yourself and take care of your mental health. In the last two episodes, I've talked about my experience with mental health, and I've talked about my experiences with assisting friends that have gone through things, or my own self going through things. And it wasn't until I was the professional staff member responding to students in crises that I started to realize that for some of these students, their lives and the things that I say are technically in my hands. Like if I don't respond to this crises in a good way, like things could change like that. And I'll talk about that a little bit. And one of the things that I think has caused me some trauma, over the past few years. But, I was responding to students who, were intoxicated, selling drugs, residents who, talked about wanting to build a wall in their room between them and their roommate during the first Trump election. And I'll get into that shortly. And all of the ideations and just like all of these things that I never thought that I would have to experience and respond to. Like growing up, I was like, oh, never would I have thought that this is where I would be. And so the way that I responded to those things when I first started responding to emergency crises was not great. Like I knew how to be compassionate and I knew how to be empathetic and sympathetic and be able to talk with individuals to understand, what their story is and things like that. But it was that aftershock of those conversations that I think caused me the most, I don't want to say pain, but like struggle. And that's not something that they talk about in this field. And I think that's hard because especially if you work in housing to capacity, like there is a huge war on mental health for professionals and even student staff that work in housing. And they don't tell you that stuff. That's not something my supervisor told me when I was, when I was in college and was like, hey, this is something you need to think about. Definitely did not exist. And so I very quickly learned that I need to take care of myself. After the fact of taking care and assisting, these students. And so that first year really put a lot of things in perspective. And then into my second year, Robbie was gone. He had went off to start his first full-time professional job. And it was myself and some of my colleagues. And, that year was super stressful because our program that we had required us to take a comprehensive exam to be able to get our degree. So everything that we had learned in class over the last, year and a half, 2 years, we had to take an exam on it. And this exam isn't just like a multiple choice fill in the blank type exam. No, like they give you like 8 essay questions. You have to answer 3 of them in 3 hours. But you also have to cite sources, and you can't bring your own sources. So you would have to know how to cite specific authors, in APA by year, but also have what their content is correct and have it make sense. And so this caused so much stress. Like, I still think about it. I still get stressed thinking about it. I was like, what kind of, like, I don't even want to call it bullying. I don't want to call it hazing because that sounds terrible, but like, man, like, let me just do like research and like actually put what I've learned to work instead of like writing an exam for 3 hours. I remember my exam ended up being, I think, like 21 pages long, like 21 or 22 pages. So I had wrote for 3 questions 7 to 8 pages per question as an answer. Like, that is ridiculous to me. But that was at the end of my time in Ohio. But I kind of mentioned this, that during my time there is when the first Trump election took place. And I remember, going to watch some of the debates in our student union with some of my staff members, and being able to have that experience with them, talking to them about, some of the things that they're hoping to see with this next president. We had, at that point, we had 8 years of Obama in office, which miss him. I miss him very, very dearly. But we were able to experience this, and then election night happened, and I will never forget this experience, because this experience was unlike anything else. Right? Trump ran on a lot of different things, from immigration policy, building walls, deporting non-citizen residents. And so there was a lot of high tension going on with that. And when he got elected, I remember the next day walking across campus and it just feeling like there was nothing, like no energy, like it was just so much sadness all around. There were not a lot of people on campus the day after. And I remember talking to some of my staff, whose family are dreamers, or they're a dreamer themselves, or residents even coming to me and freaking out about not knowing whether or not they're going to be able to finish out their college career because they have a fear of being deported. And those conversations, like, I never thought that I would be the one having those conversations as a white man with these students. And so there was so much learning involved in those conversations. And I think, as I had those conversations, it really was about showing up and being a piece of support for them. Like I had just mentioned, I had a resident that very clearly was for Trump when they built a wall in their room to separate them and their roommate who was not from this country. And it's just wild to see that that's where everything has been. Like, one election caused people to be fearful for their lives. And I talked in the very first episode how I felt like we had a new hope, with this last election, and there was nothing during that election? Nothing. Like, people just felt empty. I felt empty. I actually wrote a blog post about it, and that is up on my blog. Um, but that's stuff, again, that I never thought that I would experience. And, I had a lot of great experiences in grad school. Don't get me wrong. Like, I got to help um, be like an entertainment um, host for like ASAP Ferg and Kid Inc. I have so many memories of going downtown, going to the bars, going to the minor league baseball team games. Um, there was a place downtown that was like infamous for having different types of grilled cheese, which, oh my gosh, I miss it so much. And it was probably one of the most fun downtowns and the most fun experiences I've had in those 2 years. But I also had a lot of those things that I feel like still sit with me and have changed the way that I approach a lot of situations and a lot of my opinions have been fostered. Um, and I kind of mentioned in the first episode of this whole podcast that I am not always on the same like wavelength as my family, and I think it's because of the experience that I have working in education, and just being, I think, a decent human. But understanding that we have students that just are struggling, and I talked about this being based on the book that I was writing, and this episode I have not wrote about yet. I plan on finishing, but I haven't wrote about it because I think this is where a lot of my mental health struggles and trauma really started. Started in grad school. Once I became a professional, and so I haven't talked a lot about it. I have a lot of great memories, but I also have a lot of memories that just like aren't that great. And so grad school ends. I pass the comprehensive exam. I get my master's. Super exciting. Another graduation my dad doesn't show up to, which I think I've talked about my struggles with him. But, I left grad school not having a job. And my self-worth was pretty low. Like, I was like, I felt like I did really good on these interviews, and I had a lot of like on campuses, but I couldn't get a job. I couldn't. And the struggle with this field in higher education is that entry level, there are so many people graduating in this field, and there are a lot of entry level positions, but it's just so oversaturated with people trying to enter the field, especially from grad school. And so it is really difficult to find a job, and people don't tell you that either. And so I came home after I graduated in 2017. Came home for a few months. I worked at Papa John's, and I lived at my grandparents. I was going to Planet Fitness. I was, working out, whatever, hanging out with my friends, drinking, all off of like Papa John's money. And Papa John's is a terrible place to work at. Never worked there. But I remember sitting or working out at Planet Fitness, and I get a phone call, and the phone call is for a job in Illinois, and this is like the first phone call I got. I was like, all right, I'm gonna accept it, great. I accepted the position. You know, I started in July, so I moved to Illinois in June, and this is the first time where I'm going somewhere where I don't know anybody, and so it's kind of terrifying. Because this is my first full-time job out of grad school. Um, you know, really putting to work what I know and have worked on, for the last 6 years in college. Um, and now, moving once again to start a brand new position. And so, Illinois, working in Illinois was great for the first year. There was I met a lot of friends. We hung out all the time. I have one of my very, very close friends still to this day that I met working in Illinois, and love him very, very dearly. He taught me so much, and we just hung out all the time, went and saw all the Marvel movies together. I'm not sure how he feels about having his name shared, so I'm not going to share it, but he was one of those individuals that challenged the way that I viewed things, right? Like, I thought that I was pretty good when it comes to like social justice stuff in grad school. Like, I did quite a few things with it, but when I went to live in Illinois, that very quickly changed. I was challenged from the get-go, and so he taught me a lot, and I'm super thankful for that. But my 2 years in Illinois, I really just try to block out of my memory. There's just so much trauma from being there, from not having support, from managing and assisting students on the regular basis that have drank way too much, or who are ideating, or so on and so forth. Like, I felt like I was starting to get numb working with students. Like, I would respond to a student who was ideating, and I'd be a resource for them in the moment. But when I would go back to my apartment, like, I just felt like I would feel nothing. And that's not how I want to show up to be able to support. Like, I think there is, something to say about disconnecting yourself from helping people through stuff like that. But at the same time, like, it's going to weigh on you. And those 2 years, I think, weighed on me more than anything that I've experienced in life. And so I don't talk about it a lot because my experience was not great. And I'm not the only one that had a bad experience working at that institution. And it's tough. It really is. And so I, again, learned a lot my first year as a professional. 40 hours a week, plus, serving in an on-call rotation. This is when I really fell off starting to working out. So I started to gain weight, and, after my first year and the summer started, I was like, okay, like, I'm going to start running again. I signed up for like 6 virtual 5Ks. I did like 3 of them, but I really only wanted to do it because I wanted the medals. But I was like, 3.1 miles is not that far. So I ran a few of them during that summer. And so this would have been the summer of 2018. So 2018 going to 2019. 2018 summer, I remember August of 2018, because I developed this like really weird like skin rash. I still don't know what it was. But I started getting bumps all on my hands. And I remember one night I had such bad heart palpitations that I couldn't sleep. And so I was like freaking out. I was like, okay, this is where I die. Whatever. So I went to the emergency room. My heart rate was like 90, which isn't high at all. But because I typically have a lower heart rate in general, like my heart rate sits around like 60, like resting, 60 or 70. So when it gets up that high, like it just feels like everything's intensifying. So I remember going to the emergency room at like 4 a.m. in the morning and sitting there for a while. They did their EKG, things like that. And they're like, you're fine, like just go relax, like whatever. Didn't talk about my hands at all because I still had the bumps on my hands. And then I tried to work through the day, but I was still having palpitations. Like I had palpitations all day. And so I went back to the emergency room. And they were like, no, you're fine. You know, they didn't really give me a response. So then I started going to see some other doctors. You know, the amount of times that I went to an urgent care or an ER for, you know, palpitations or my hands or whatever, I went like seven different times between like August and September, like in August alone. And you know, I would go, they would, you know, people would say, oh, well, it looks like you have this, and it wasn't that. They would prescribe me some stuff and it didn't help. They're like, here's a cream for the bumps, whatever. And then, you know, I'd go and then another doctor would be like, oh, it's just anxiety, you're fine. Another doctor, oh, it's just anxiety, you're fine. Like I had 5 doctors tell me that it was anxiety. Like didn't do any other searches or do any other tests. They just chalked it up to anxiety. Which, like, to be fair, I'm pretty sure it was anxiety from like looking at my hand and being like, what are these bumps? Then I finally went to another doctor and they prescribed me prednisone, which is used pretty often. And so I was taking the prednisone, and the rash that I had on my hands then spread up my arms and spread on my full body and onto my feet. And I was like, that's probably not supposed to happen. Like the prednisone, I guess, spreads it, and then like your skin peels. So I remember like, this is gonna be disgusting. I remember just like pulling off large chunks of skin off my arms and my feet. Sounds super gross. But I was like, okay, whatever. So that healed up. And then I had an incident where I had to respond to a student death on campus. And I was there when they were working on the student. You know, I had to go to the room when the coroners were there. I had to tell this kid's roommate that his roommate died. Like, why me? Like, I'm an entry-level professional and I'm the one having these conversations. Like, that's not right. And so this is one of the most traumatic things that's ever happened in my life. And that's why I don't talk about my time there. That's why I stopped writing my book, because I just didn't want to relive it. Like, I still relive it. I can relive everything about that in my mind. And then I was told, this happened at like 4 a.m. I was told, oh, go back to sleep because you got work in the morning. What? Like, I just responded to a student death, and you're gonna tell me just to go sleep and go back to work? So this is where my turn for like wanting to move out of Illinois started, because I wasn't provided any support after that situation. And that's when I first started going to counseling. Because I was at this point where like I was reliving the trauma of that night and I couldn't sleep. I went to counseling. They gave me some prescribed me some medication at the doctor's office, and I took it for a little bit and just felt so numb. Like I had no highs, I had no lows. I was like, I'm not taking this medication. Like I cannot. And so I spent the next 4 or 5 months going through the motions, still trying to figure out what the heck is wrong with my body. I'm having chest pains now. Um, they're like, oh, it could be digestive. Uh, Still never did any tests. I still haven't had tests done to this day for digestive stuff, but I really started to understand like how bad healthcare is and how difficult this field is and how the reason why turnover is so high in this field. Like the number of people that don't last 5 years in this field is crazy. Like these are the statistics that they do not tell you when you're searching for a job, when you're in grad school. Uh, so if you're watching this and you're interested in this field, and I'm telling you, these are some of the things you have to think about. Now, I was looking for a job when I was still living in Illinois, and again, I was struggling to find any place that would hire me. Like I have such a plethora of experience, and it was tough. And then I remember getting offered 3 jobs, two at the same institution and another institution as well. I got offered the day after, and like I got offered the current institution that I work at, 2 positions here, um, like all in the same week. I was like, great, I'm moving back to Michigan. Love it. Um, so moved back to Michigan, started working at the current institution that I'm at, which is actually like 40 minutes from where I grew up. Um, and so I get to spend a lot of time with my mom, um, and being close with her. And the experience here is that I have it's a smaller institution, so I get a lot of different my hands in a lot of different things. Um, which is awesome. So I started here in 2019, in July of 2019. Everything was going great. I got into a relationship in 2019 working here. We did some traveling. We went to North Carolina. We, spent New Year's Eve together. We planned out a whole vacation to Florida and spent a week in Disney, which again, love Disney. And then COVID hit. And we all know and we've been in COVID for a little over a year now. Um, and so COVID caused me to find another therapist. So I've been doing that. Also started and to go on anxiety medication, um, medication that actually works, but still haven't figured out why I was having chest issues. Still haven't done any sort of scoping at all. And so I have a lot of distrust in the systems that we have around us. Um, and, it's, 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 hard to have that. you know, at the end of the day, like, I just want everybody to have an opportunity to be who they are and have an opportunity to succeed in life. And we're never going to get to that point if we continually have people that are oppressed. Um, and that's been a lot of the work that I've been working on over the last couple years, and I'm going to continue to work on. Right? Um, I feel like I've been a lot more active over the last couple years that I've been here. Not only with social media, but posting podcasts and streaming a lot, and being like active and sharing a lot of things that are taking place and being vocal about them. And so these last 2 years would be very easy for me to put back into a book and finish that book out. Um, but because I have that 4 year gap where I had more negative experiences than positive, that's why I stopped. And, all this to say, the entire purpose of the book that I was writing was about resilience. And frankly, I wasn't resilient enough to be able to write and finish. And so there are a lot more experiences that I would be sharing in the book, if I do decide to sit down and finish writing it. But I'd rather just share it and talk about it. That's why I started this podcast, because I think that there are often too many things in our lives that we experience alone and don't have other people to assist, or we feel like we're going to be a burden for asking for help. And let me tell you that you're never going to be a burden for asking for help. The other person may not be the right person to provide that help, but there's always going to be somebody. And sometimes it's hard to tell yourself that you made mistakes, or that you need help, or that you're not going through this stuff alone, because at the end of the day you're not. I talked about my mental health, and there are millions of other people that experience the same things or similar things. And so at the end of the day, the primary basis of this podcast is to know that we need to show up for each other. It's all about the human experience. It's all about compassion towards others. And it's all about how we persevere and how resilient we can be with what's thrown at us. I sit here recording this podcast thinking and knowing that, I'm a white man and I don't have the experiences of, you know, marginalized groups. But that doesn't mean I can't be compassionate and listen to their story and try and find ways to leverage my privilege to help them. And so at the end of the day, it really comes down to the love of humankind and how we support and show up for each other. And that is what I will continue to focus this podcast on. Because we need, in order to be successful and stop the hate, we need to do the work and show up. And so, for the love of humankind, I thank you for tuning in for this episode. If you made it all the way through, please comment some of the things that you're working on, or if you want to message me about things that you've experienced, please do. And we'll see you next week. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you in the next episode.